Buenas, buenas. Welcome to Music Marketing TV. I'm Kevin Ochoa, and today we're going to take a look at Kilohearts Phase Plant. Now, this is a very special synthesizer because, one, you could do all types of synthesis with it: wavetable, analog synthesis, emulation. I think the only thing you can't do, I think, is granular. Let me take a look. I'm pretty sure you can find a way to make some granular synthesis here, but as far as we can see here, we have analog, noise, sampler, and wavetable. And then, of course, we can use other filters and other distortion units within the lanes themselves to create other various effects and create a non-traditional synthesizer. So it's almost like we're working with modules, but without really having a modular synthesizer. So I'm going to teach you guys how to, set up the synthesizer, how to open up the oscillators, how to send them via outputs into the lanes, and how to modulate parameters within the synthesis engines and the effects within the lanes. So basically, I wanted to do a introductory video for Kilohearts Phase Plant, and then we're going to look at something much more complex in future videos. Talking about future videos, this is going to be the first in a series of 3 videos for Kilohearts. In the next video, we're going to cover a multipass, and that's a very cool plugin because it allows you to turn processing that was, maybe just commonly used for a wideband, so the whole spectrum. Now you can apply it to a multiband lane, basically, as we have lanes here. But in the case of multipass, we have lanes for the bands, the low band, the low mids, the high mids, and the highs. So there's up to 5 lanes, I believe, in that plugin. So it's a very exciting plugin to look at. And then the video after that, we're going to look at mixing with a bunch of different various snapping plugins from Faceplant, which we're going to use not as a snap-in format, but as a VST format. So we're going to implement them into the project itself here. As you can see, I am using some of these along the way. It's so many plugins to talk about when you talk about Kilohertz. But to start off, we're going to look at Faceplant, multipass, and then some of the cool plugins like disperser, the transgate, and some of those. All right. So this track that I have here is going to be the track we're going to use to demo most of these plugins. Now, right now it's still, in sound design stage. So I haven't really mixed it yet. It sounds quite good already because we have processing already on the lanes themselves within Faceplant, but it's going to sound even better once we're done with it. But let's take a listen to it. So there we go. That's the demo track. I mean, so far it's like a hard wave track, so we're going to see how to make the kick drum, the bass, the reese bass, some of the saws, because that's absolutely essential when you're trying to learn synthesis. And we're going to look at the lead. So we're going to look at 4 different instruments. Okay. It's going to be kind of similar vibe to the tall mod video because I'm going to show you how to use this synthesizer and how to move the envelopes around so you feel comfortable with it. So here we have the kick drum, and we're gonna solo it right here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna clone this. I'm gonna cut and paste this, and I'm just gonna init the synthesizer. That quick. You know, I really love this. Imagine how much time you would save if you didn't have to hop into your browser, look for the init patch, and then init the synth. Just having that new button there, it just makes it so much quicker to get an idea and boom, draw it out. So up here we have the generator section. Down here we have the modulator section, and over here we have the effects section. For the generators, we have several options. We have generators, effects, and utilities. So in this case, we're going to go with analog. And you see immediately when you create this, there's an analog oscillator, and then there's an output. Now, when you first start using Faceplant, what I was confused was I added the analog, so I wanted to add another oscillator. However, when you play this back, and if I were to detune this, you don't hear detuning. So what happens here is that you have to set the output to be ahead of the signal, right? So now what's happening is these two analog oscillators are getting mixed into these outputs. And then the output is going into the lanes. See that? Now we have that detunement. Let's lower that. Much smoother. So because of this, we can say, hey, we can add a lane. Let's add a chorus effect to this. Right? If I wanted to send this to lane 2, I could do so, and I could maybe add a filter. Let's do a bandpass. There you go. Now let's say I wanted to add, another layer. I'm going to add an analog layer, but this time we set it to square wave, and then we can change the pulse width. And of course, we're not going to hear it, so I'm going to add another output. And now this is going to go to lane 3. So see, we can hear that now. Let's add it to, let's add a filter to it. Right, and now we can add a envelope here. Now this envelope is not your ADSR envelope. Your ADSR envelope is actually over here on the output stage. See that? So I'll get back to it in a second. But for now, what I'll do is I'll decrease the sustain here and make a little plucky sound with the pulse width. Let's engage the modulation section and send it over to the filter cutoff. And I want to decrease the filter cutoff right here. So you see now we have the filter affecting, or the filter being affected by the envelope. Now what we can do here, once you go down to the lanes, we can say, hey, I want lane 2 to go directly to the master. So you can hear the bandpass saws that are detuned from each other, separate from, we're not separate, but not filtered by the filter on lane 3. See that? Now we can make the Q more narrow. And now we have created a layered sound. So essentially what we're doing here is we're avoiding the whole concept of having to use different synths for different layers, because we created basically different patches here, and now we're mixing them within these 3 layers into a master output, So instead of having to, stack all your supersaws or stack all your leads from different synths, you could do so here without much complication. On top of that, before we have this filter, we can actually engage another filter here. So if I were to add a filter, run it before the output stage. Now let's mute this one. And in this case, I'm just going to use the cutoff right here. Modulate that. See that? Now we have the little pluck. Almost as if we had it over here with the other filter. So it's really cool that we can do that. On top of this, we also have a distortion. So we can create some overdrive and other various types of distortion. So as you can see, we can start to get very complex without being very cluttered. And that's the beauty of Faceplant. And at first, I didn't really understand it when it was released. I was like, I got my Virus TI. I'm very happy with it. I don't really need to do this. But once you start using this, you can really dig deep into creating patches that sound not just straight out of the box, but you can use over and over again in songs because you have these lanes that you can create your mix chain for, and use them over and over again. So instead of having to load both a synth patch and then your mixer track state, if you're in FL Studio, or a mixer track state in Studio One or any other DAW, instead of having to load both to get that same sound out of the box, you can do that with Faceplant with just the Faceplant preset. So it saves you so much time. Anyway, I got carried over a little bit. Let's go back to the patch on the kick drum. So let's set new. Remember, that's how quick it is to set a init patch. Let's choose analog output, and in this case, we're going to choose sine wave. Now, with this sine wave, what we're going to do is we're going to modulate it. We're going to grab a envelope, decrease the sustain, make the decay short, and make the attack basically instantaneous. Now we're going to set right here and add some curve to that decay. And we're going to send this to modulate the pitch. We can do up to 120 steps or notes. So you see that? If we press play right here, we have a click and we have like the sine wave playing. We want to make this a little bit, rounder, so we're going to start to roll back the decay. And simultaneously, we're going to set the envelope range to be shorter. So let's do 64. Let's see what that sounds like. Better, but still too chirpy. So we're going to pull it back even more. Let's do 32. Somewhere around there. There we go. Starting to sound more like a kick drum. The next thing I'll do right here is play around with the envelope on the output. So I'm going to set the release to be longer. Decrease the sustain a little bit. Cool. Now, another cool thing I could do here is add another analog oscillator, make it a saw wave, and then what we're going to do is, check this out. I'm going to click right here. Set this to 32, exactly 32. And then we're going to do the same with the sense over here. And to get to that, I'm double clicking. Not double clicking, left clicking. And to see those numbers, what I'm doing is I'm right clicking. So I'm able to actually type them in. So now these envelopes move together. So if I were to move the decay a lot, they move together. Let's restore that last movement. Now what I'll do here is on this analog one, second, I'm gonna add an output, put it on the first analog, try to copy the settings a little bit, but on the second analog oscillator, what I'll do is I'll add a filter. And now that one will also be modulated by the cutoff. So let's drag this down. Cool. So now we get this warm 808 type of sound. What we could do to make this even, last longer is increase the release and decrease the sustain. Now we can choose, let's say, to add distortion. Let's add a distortion. We can do overdrive, saturation, fold back sine, hard clip, quantize. What you notice here now is that because we have the polyphony up, we start to have overlappings from notes. So what we're going to do is set this to retrig. And now we have a cleaner sound. So we can do a couple things. You can change the bias, change the spread, which I would do if we were, creating a lead. Let's, push this up just to see what it sounds like. It sounds so funny, but when you pitch it back down, sounds nice and warm. And now this envelope, what we could do is change the percentage, of how drastically it affects everything. So we can decrease this. And what it kind of does is it makes it so that the, envelope is not as drastic. So it smoothens out that pitch envelope and also the filter. Okay, let's play this back with the track to see what it sounds like. Pretty darn good. Let's cut and paste the other one back in. In this case, I would still use the old one because I processed it quite a bit. I made sure that the attack was right on phase with the rest of my instruments. And also that it wasn't as distorted, so I would still have some space for the reese. So what I could do is go back to the other one and change the amount of distortion or harmonics that we let out from the saw wave itself. And the other little trick I'm using, I think, is compression. So I'm using a bit of compression as well, a little bit of phase distortion, and a filter to clean things up a little bit, because what you'll find is that there's still some harmonics down here that you might not want that are taking up space. So I filter them out over here to clean up and tighten up the sound even more. So that's just another trick you can do. Okay, enough of that kick drum. Let's hop over to the reese bass. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to recreate exactly. However, here's the main idea. You don't want the reese bass to be slamming on the attack, so you pull the envelope a little bit back. Let's clone this as we're speaking about it. And it's in it. So, out of the envelope, increase the attack, and decrease the decay. Actually, a little bit like that. Okay. So this envelope is going to be for the filter, so that the reese is not slamming with all the high end when it hits. So let's add some oscillators now. Let's go for an analog oscillator. Let's add another analog oscillator, and these two will be detuned a little bit. Then in this case, because we have the ability to use a wavetable, I'm going to start using some wavetables as well. Let's drag this out. What we could do for the wavetables is choose maybe some growls. Now this modulation is going to go to, or the envelope is going to go to the filter. So, oh, I need to add a filter first. Filter. Boom. And then we're going to modulate the cutoff. Or make sure that we bring the cutoff a little bit lower. Maybe somewhere around 300 hertz. Let's play back. And now we're missing some movement. Why? Because we need unison. So I'm going to use unison on these saw waveforms, and we'll start detuning. Okay, now that we have that, what I'll do is introduce some distortion. And the other thing I'll do is I'll add an envelope, and I'll have that affect the frame of the wavetables oscillators, just so we can get you more movement. Okay, let's go back to the other reese for a second. Okay, let's go back to the new one. Okay, I forgot to do the spread. which is very, very obvious, but I forgot to do it. So now instead of the waveforms like just clogging down the center and just phasing with each other at the center, you open them up and you get that white effect. It's something very simple, and I just simply forgot it right now. Reopen it. Let's add the saturator. And that does a lot of help. Lots and lots of help. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another modulation source. In this case, I'm going to use note information, and I'm going to modulate the filter cutoff. There we go. Clear on the envelope a little bit. I like how that sounds. Let's add a compressor to this. Let's hear the track. Another thing I could think of right here that would be interesting would be either adding a filter, comb filter flanger, or a phaser. Let's try a phaser. Ooh, a resonator seems kind of risky, but let's see. Let's modulate that by the note information. Hold up, let's we are in, I believe, A sharp is the scale. I might be wrong. Let's do A sharp. And in this case, what we could do is grab the intensity and modulate that by the envelope here. And that's pretty cool. That adds a different taste or a different flavor to the reese that we originally had. So you can use that to contrast during a break or during a drop. It can be very interesting. As for the other one, again, I made it really nice and tight. Different from what we have on the other one where it's brighter. It's a little bit more stereo. This one's nice and tight. And low, it has this really nasty growl. And it all depends on the type of waveforms you use. In this case, I'd use the vocals and the neuron wavetable, which we did use again. But, it all depends. The phase distortion also helps quite a bit. Let me show you. Get rid of the resonator. And we'll use phase distortion. See, it doesn't just make it louder, it also changes the harmonic content. So this is very important, or our perception of the harmonic content with the phase distortion. So it's very cool that we are able to do this and make something have a little bit more bite than we didn't have before. So that's another cool tip for your reeses within Kilohearts Phase Plant. So let's paste back this to the original patch. And the next thing we'll do is look at the supersaws, which are in the drop. Let's listen to them in solo. Of course, we need to turn on the mod wheel. And these are quite a bit easier to process than it looks. I did a lot of messing around. I try to find the best compatible sound for the main aggressive lead. So I wanted to, make something that was a little softer, and I was happy with this result. But you see, I did quite a bit of processing beforehand to see what the best that I could get. So let's clone this, and let's set it to new, and we're just gonna cut and paste. And of course, we don't hear anything. We have to add our generators. Let's go for 2 analogs. And then we're going to set them to unison. We're at 8 voices. Let's turn off the reverb and delays for now. Now that's, very similar to the patch we have over here. I think there's one more oscillator somewhere here that's playing. It could be an octave higher. No, there's an aux, but basically they're playing the same thing, just a little bit different with the detune and the spread. One of them also has a little bit of sync, so it's just a tiny bit different. By the way, there's this really cool feature here where you can change the voicings on this. It might not sound great right now, but check this out. So you would have to play the correct notes with this, but you're able to create like these chord stabs. Yeah, so it's one of those things where you're like, hey, I want to make something that sounds ravey. Throw that on there, throw some reverb on it, throw some distortion, big crushing, and boom, you have a rave stab. So that's really cool. Let's try out a major real quick. Of course, we would have to solo this. Let's do this. Let's just do this real quick for fun. Let's press T. Oh, and we're just gonna solo one of the notes in the chords. So let's just do this really quickly. It wasn't planned, but let's go for it. Let's add a distortion. Okay, that was too aggressive. Let's choose a regular one. Let's add some chorusing. And we're gonna let's send this down an octave. I don't know why is it pointed to that. Yeah. Now the next thing we have to do is decrease the release here. And let's change it back up an octave. Feels more happy this way. Let's add the big crusher. And you can, try to replicate the sampler that you want to emulate. If it's, the Kai, you can go ahead and do so. Or you want to do, another sampler of your choice, you can go ahead and emulate that. And the next thing you want to do here is, let's see, where do we have I don't want a comb filter. Where's the reverb? No, not the reverb. Compressor. And then we're going to add a envelope on this. And we're going to place it on the gain from lane 1. And we're going to bring the gain all the way down. And now it sounds like a rave sound. So let's add the reverbs from the track earlier. Let's look at it in minor. The major one fits better. Let's do major 7. Cool. So, that's gonna be the start for a patch for a rave stab. I got a little carried away there, but you could do that. It's very, very simple to do here. We're just using one oscillator. Remember that. One oscillator. So likewise, where we use a ton of oscillators in the other, patch, in this case, we're using one oscillator, but a ton of processing. And we could go ahead and modulate all these processes that we like, change the bit quantize, and all these other things, So it's a very, very powerful thing. Let's reset this. Now for the supersaws, again, do analog, change the sense on them, and make them unison, of course. Set them to 8. Spread them nice and wide. And just add a bit of detune. Let's add a filter. And finally, an envelope that's going to control the pluckiness of the sound. We're going to set it to modulate the filter cutoff. And we can change the slope here. I think the 2 sounds the best for this type of stuff. Again, we could use a ensemble type of thing to make it sound even wider. If you wanted to do more like a lead type of sound, I would use a saturator. In this case, since we have to stack up the notes here, I would not do that. So let's reintroduce the notes here. Make our chords. Okay. And let's hear that with the rest of the track. Let's add just a little bit of saturator in. Eek, not that much. Let's mix it in. In this case, I would change the envelope a little bit. Increase the release. There we go, or supersaws. So now onto the final sound that we're going to break down this video, which is the lead. So here is the lead. Now for this one, I'm not going to recreate the whole thing from scratch because this is much more complex patch. As you can see, I went through various stages of, ups and downs of saying, this doesn't really fit. What can I do here to make this sound better? But the main gist of it is kind of like the supersaw, where we're going to use different waveforms to phase away from each other. And in this case, what I did was I have one saw wave that's overdriven into the filter, along with two quieter wavetables. And then I bring in one of the wavetables that I find that's to better taste. And I make that louder than the other wavetable. So now we're creating, this phasing without having any of the processors going on over here. Let's also reduce or remove the effects over here for a second. You see, I'm still doing a bit of processing, but I'll show you in a second. It's play the sound without or with the effects on over here. See that? If I take off the analog oscillator. So they all add a little bit up to, to the flavor of the sound. So in this case, again, I'm using those oscillators, and I'm using a filter. This filter is being modulated by an envelope and also the notes. So it's, moving along and actually playing back the, the right note where it's going to push the resonance high and make the sound musical. Now, the other thing I'm doing is I'm using an LFO, and that's also modulating the pitch of some of these sounds. Just by a tiny little bit, you see that? Anyways, so we can do that. We could also make it much more extreme. So if you want something that sounds like hardstyle, you can be extreme with that. But in our case, we're going for something very, very subtle. So I'll use very, very low changes on that. In our case, we're going for something subtle, so I'd go for no more than 1%. See, we're still getting a little bit of that distortion, but it's not being too aggressive. Now, for the lanes themselves, we have the first lane, which has a 3-band EQ. And let me show you what it's doing. It's scooping out the mid-range, boosting up the highs, and the lows a little bit are also reduced because we want to create a lot of bite. And in the next step, what I do is I create a lot of distortion. And the foldback is perfect for this because it's not as soft as the other ones. I'm going to use a little bit of reverb over here. Let me show you. And now, the cool thing here is I'm modulating this by an envelope. So you can go ahead and do so to control the mix of the reverb to make it duck down. See that? If I remove it, the sound sounds like it's coming out of synth, but once I add this, it sounds like it's coming out of speaker. Notice how my decay is very low. It's as low as I can probably get. Alright, so we do that, and then we add distortion. So it's sometimes what you do with guitars. You run through reverb and then through distortion again. And then we have a 3-band EQ to get rid of, the high end that it really pushed over here, and the low end again. So now we have this sound that's more compact, that has less high end, less low end, but it's focused in the mid range. And finally, once we head on over here, I do a bit more processing around the mid sides to do some tricks. And then I add a distortion just in the mid range from 250 hertz to 2170 hertz. Now I could have done this within Faceplant itself, but I thought about it after. Let's turn these on as I'm explaining them. See how drastic just changing 1 or 2 dB is to a sound? It's very important that you do this. And I'm doing this with dynamic EQ, so it's, changing throughout, when the sounds are forcing that, frequency area. Those frequencies are getting shut down if we're poking too much. Kind of irritating. That sounds like it's further back, like it's, again, like a guitar playing somewhere else. And then multipass comes in. So now I'm distorting just the mid-range, but, leaving the high end and the low end intact. I'm using some Pro C2. Yeah, this is for my side tuning for my kick drum. And then I'm using an inflator. And finally, another Pro Q3. Again, to tame the sound a little bit and make it sound like a guitar again. Synth. Cabinet guitar. And that fits to me the best in the track. So let's play this back. I'll turn on the reverbs. Okay, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, that you learned something new. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with, our future videos on other music production and audio software. Once again, I'm Kevin Ochoa with Music Marketing TV, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.